Hello everyone, and welcome back to Daily English Podcast. I'm so happy you're here today. Whether you're listening while taking a walk, driving, working, studying, relaxing at home, or getting ready for bed, thank you for choosing to spend this time with me. Today's episode is about something almost all of us experience. Something that happens quietly inside our own heads, yet it has the power to completely ruin a perfectly good day. We are going to talk about our minds creating problems that don't actually exist. Maybe you've worried for days about a difficult conversation that never even happened. Maybe you've imagined the absolute worst possible outcome before anything actually went wrong. Or maybe you've spent hours feeling stressed, sick to your stomach, and exhausted about a situation that eventually turned out to be completely fine. If any of that sounds familiar, I want you to know right now that you're definitely not alone. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. What's one situation where your mind made you worry for absolutely no reason? Share your experience in the comments below. I genuinely enjoy reading your comments, and your stories often inspire future episodes. So, let's start with a few interesting questions. What if your biggest source of stress isn't reality at all, but your own imagination? What if your brain is constantly trying to protect you, but it's using an incredibly outdated and unhelpful strategy? What if the tragic, scary stories you tell yourself in the dark are far more dangerous to your health than the actual situations you're so afraid of? We are going to explore all of these questions today. We will look at why our brains are designed to expect disaster, and how we can gently teach them to focus on reality instead. We'll discover the quiet difference between a fact and a feeling. But later, we'll discover why your brain actually prefers the pain of a negative certainty over the discomfort of not knowing the future. Yes, it sounds strange, but understanding this one concept can completely change your relationship with anxiety. Have you ever caught yourself completely losing your peace of mind over a simple text message? Let's imagine a man named David. David is a graphic designer. It's a beautiful Friday afternoon. The sun is shining, the weekend is just a few hours away, and David is feeling great about his week. He's looking forward to relaxing. At 4:30 p.m., his phone lights up. It's a message from his manager. The message says, "Hi David, can you come to my office first thing on Monday morning? We need to talk." That's it. Just 2 sentences. In a fraction of a second, David's beautiful Friday afternoon disappears. His heart rate speeds up. His stomach feels tight. His brain instantly goes to work building a terrible story. He thinks, "We need to talk." That's never good. What did I do wrong? Did I mess up the presentation on Wednesday? Did a client complain about me? They're going to fire me. They are definitely going to fire me. For the next 2 days, David is physically present with his family, but mentally, he is living in a disaster zone. He doesn't sleep well on Friday night. On Saturday, he secretly starts looking at job websites. On Sunday, he is irritable and snappy with his wife because the stress is overwhelming. He is imagining how he will pay his rent when he loses his job. He has lived through an entire tragedy. Monday morning finally arrives. David walks into his manager's office, feeling like he is walking to his own execution. His manager smiles, points to a chair, and says, "David, have a seat. I just wanted to talk to you early because we just got a huge new project from a major client, and I want you to be the lead designer on it. You've been doing great work." David feels a massive wave of relief, but also, a strange sense of exhaustion. He spent 60 hours suffering, stressing, and ruining his weekend over a promotion. Maybe you've experienced something similar. You've probably lost sleep over an email, a sideways look from a friend, or a strange sound in your car. Why do our minds do this? Why, when given a neutral piece of information like "we need to talk," does the brain immediately choose the worst possible interpretation? To understand this, we have to look back at how our brains evolved. It's completely understandable when you realize that your brain was not designed to make you happy, peaceful, or relaxed. Your brain is an ancient survival machine. Its primary job, above everything else, is to keep you alive. Thousands of years ago, the humans who survived were the ones who expected danger. If an early human was walking through the wild and saw the grass moving, they couldn't afford to be optimistic. They couldn't think, oh, it's probably just a beautiful bird. Because if they thought it was a bird, and it was actually a dangerous predator, they wouldn't survive. The humans who survived were the ones who instantly thought, that moving grass is a tiger, and I am going to die if I don't run. Our ancestors were the anxious ones. They were the ones who imagined problems. They were the ones who expected the worst. And they passed those anxious, highly alert brains down to us. Psychologists call this the negativity bias. Our brains are like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. Velcro is that sticky material that holds things together tightly. Teflon is the smooth material on a frying pan that nothing sticks to. Your brain naturally holds onto potential problems, insults, and fears, but it lets compliments, safety, and good news slide right off. So, when David received that text message, his modern brain reacted exactly like the ancient brain seeing the grass move. It sensed a potential threat, and it hit the alarm button. It is completely normal that your mind does this. You are not broken. You are not weak for worrying. Your brain is simply doing its very best to protect you from tigers. But there is a major problem with this. The tigers today are mostly imaginary. They are emails, awkward social interactions, uncertain futures, and financial worries. And your physical body does not know the difference between a real tiger and an imagined failure. Think about that for a moment. When David imagined getting fired, his brain released the exact same stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, that he would need to run away from a physical attack. His muscles tensed. His breathing became shallow. His digestion slowed down. He was putting his body through intense physical trauma over a story that his own brain invented. This brings us to a really important idea in psychology, the concept of catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is a cognitive distortion. A cognitive distortion is simply a trick our mind plays on us, convincing us of something that isn't true. It's like wearing sunglasses with dark red lenses. Everything you look at appears red, even though the world hasn't actually changed color. When we catastrophize, we take a small piece of negative information or a moment of uncertainty, and we rapidly escalate it into an absolute disaster. Let's look at another story, this time about a university student named Maya. Maya is studying for a very important final exam in her mathematics class. It's late at night, and she is struggling to understand a complex formula. She tries to solve a practice problem and gets the wrong answer. A realistic, helpful thought would be, this formula is difficult. I need to ask my professor for help tomorrow, or maybe watch a tutorial video. But Maya's brain slips into catastrophizing. She thinks, I don't understand this. I'm going to fail the exam on Friday. If I fail the exam, I'm going to fail the whole class. If I fail the class, my GPA will drop. I'll lose my scholarship. If I lose my scholarship, I'll have to drop out of university. I will never get a good job. My whole life is going to be a failure. In a matter of 30 seconds, Maya went from a math mistake on a Tuesday night to living in total poverty for the rest of her life. Have you ever caught yourself riding this kind of mental elevator? The elevator that goes straight from the ground floor of a minor inconvenience, all the way down to the dark basement of total ruin? You're definitely not the only one. We all have a tendency to catastrophize, especially when we are tired, hungry, or already feeling stressed. But why do we do it? Why do we torture ourselves with these imaginary scenarios? There is a fascinating reason for this. Our brains absolutely hate uncertainty. To the human brain, not knowing what is going to happen feels incredibly dangerous. If you are waiting for the results of a medical test, or waiting after a job interview, the waiting is often much harder than actually getting bad news. Because the brain hates the blank space of uncertainty, it tries to fill it in. And because of the negativity bias we talked about earlier, it fills it in with the worst possible outcome. Your brain secretly believes that if it imagines the worst-case scenario, it will be prepared for it. It feels like productive work. Worrying feels like you are doing something to solve the problem. But worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. We think that by imagining the disaster, it won't hurt as much if it actually happens. But psychology shows us this isn't true. If the bad thing happens, it will hurt just as much. But by worrying about it in advance, you are simply choosing to suffer twice. Once in your imagination, and once in reality. And the tragedy is, 90% of the things we worry about never, ever happen. We suffer so much more in our imagination than we do in reality. I want to invite you to take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment, if it's safe for you to do so right now. Think about a major worry you had a year ago. Maybe it was a project at work, a health scare, or a conflict with a friend. Try to remember the heavy, dark feeling in your chest when you thought about it. Try to remember the stories your mind was telling you about how terrible it was going to be. Now, open your eyes. How did that situation actually resolve? Did the absolute worst-case scenario happen? Or did it pass? Did you figure it out? Did the reality turn out to be much more manageable than the horror movie your brain directed? Most of the time, we realize that all the mental energy we spent worrying was completely wasted. Let's shift our focus to how this impacts our relationships, because this is where imaginary problems can cause the most damage. Think about romantic relationships, or even close friendships. When we communicate with other people, there is always room for misunderstanding. And where there is misunderstanding, our minds love to create problems. Let me tell you about a couple named Emma and Leo. They had been dating for about 6 months. One evening, Emma had a terrible day at her office. Her computer crashed, she missed a deadline, and she had a headache. She was feeling totally exhausted. She met Leo for dinner at a local restaurant. When she sat down, she was quiet. She looked down at the table. She wasn't smiling her usual smile. Now, let's look inside Leo's mind. Leo noticed her silence immediately. Because Leo has a bit of insecurity about the relationship, his brain starts trying to solve the problem of Emma's silence. He thinks, she's so quiet. She barely said hello. She must be mad at me. What did I do? Did I say something insensitive yesterday? Is she losing interest in me? Maybe she wants to break up, and she's just trying to find the right way to say it. Notice what Leo's brain is doing. It is taking a neutral fact Emma is quiet and adding a massive, tragic story to it. This is another common cognitive distortion called mind reading. Mind reading is when we assume we know exactly what someone else is thinking or feeling, without any real evidence. We assume their thoughts are negative, and we assume those negative thoughts are about us. Because Leo is now convinced that Emma is unhappy with him, his behavior changes. He becomes defensive. He crosses his arms. He speaks in a cold, short tone. Emma, who is just tired and has a headache, notices Leo acting cold and distant. Now, let's look inside Emma's mind. She thinks, why is he being so rude? I've had such a hard day, and he doesn't even care. He's being so unsupportive. Maybe he's not a nice person after all. Within 20 minutes, they are having an argument about where to park the car, but the argument is really about the imaginary stories they are both telling themselves. If Leo had simply asked a clarifying question, if he had separated the fact from the story, everything would have been different. The fact, Emma is quiet. Leo's story, Emma wants to break up with me. What if Leo had just asked, hey, you seem a little quiet tonight. Did you have a hard day? Emma would have said, oh, my day was awful. My computer crashed and I have a terrible headache. I'm so glad to see you, I just don't have a lot of energy. Instantly, the imaginary problem vanishes. The tiger disappears from the bushes. Leo feels relieved, Emma feels supported, and they have a nice dinner. Our minds often work this way. We create an entire imaginary reality based on a facial expression, a sigh, or the tone of a text message. We forget that other people have entire lives, stresses, and thoughts that have absolutely nothing to do with us. It is completely understandable to feel insecure sometimes. But we have to learn to catch ourselves when we start mind reading. If you've been through a misunderstanding like this, let me know in the comments. Have you ever assumed someone was angry at you, only to find out they were just tired or distracted by something else? It's a very human experience. Earlier, I mentioned that there is one specific mental habit that secretly makes imaginary problems much worse. It acts like fuel for the fire of anxiety. That habit is called confirmation bias. Once your mind creates a negative story, it wants to prove that the story is true. Your brain hates being wrong almost as much as it hates uncertainty. So, if you create the story that nobody at my new job likes me, your brain will put on a special filter. It will begin scanning your environment for any piece of evidence that proves you are right. If a coworker walks past your desk and doesn't say good morning, your brain says, "See? I told you. They hate you." If you aren't invited to a meeting that you didn't need to be at anyway, your brain says, "Look at that. They are leaving you out." Meanwhile, your brain completely ignores the evidence that contradicts your story. It ignores the coworker who offered to get you a coffee. It ignores the boss who smiled at you. It ignores the friendly email you received. Your brain deletes the positive evidence because it doesn't fit the terrible story you've chosen to believe. Confirmation bias is why it is so easy to stay trapped in imaginary problems. You literally stop seeing the good things in your reality. Think about social anxiety, which is something so many people struggle with, especially when speaking a second language like English. Imagine a young professional named Carlos. Carlos is attending a networking event. English is his second language, and he is very self-conscious about his accent and his grammar. Before he even enters the room, his mind creates a problem. Everyone is going to judge me. I'm going to sound stupid. I will probably use the wrong word, and they will laugh at me silently. I shouldn't even be here. Carlos goes into the room feeling tight, nervous, and expecting disaster. He introduces himself to a group of people. While he is talking, one of the men in the group looks down at his phone. Because Carlos is experiencing confirmation bias, his brain immediately locks onto that detail. He's looking at his phone. He's bored. He thinks my English is terrible. I am boring him. Carlos feels a rush of heat to his face. He quickly finishes his story, makes an excuse, and leaves the event early, feeling defeated and ashamed. But what was the reality? The man who looked at his phone? His wife was 9 months pregnant, and he was anxiously waiting for a text message from her. It had absolutely nothing to do with Carlos. In fact, before Carlos left, the other people in the group were genuinely interested in what he was saying. But Carlos couldn't see that. His imaginary problem, the fear of being judged, created a real-world consequence. He missed an opportunity to make friends and build his career. This is the true cost of living inside our imagined problems. It isn't just that it makes us feel stressed. It's that it actually changes our behavior. When we believe our negative thoughts, we shrink. We hide. We push people away. We say no to opportunities. We stop living in the present moment, and we start living in a dark, scary, imaginary future. So, how do we stop this? How do we break the cycle when our brains are so naturally wired to look for problems? We cannot stop our brains from generating negative thoughts. Trying to never have a negative thought is impossible, and it will only make you feel frustrated. Your brain is a thought-generating machine. It's going to produce anxious thoughts just like your heart produces beats. But here is the most powerful psychological tool you can ever develop. You do not have to believe everything you think. Just because a thought appears in your mind, does not make it a fact. I want to repeat that because it is so important. A thought is not a fact. A feeling is not a fact. In psychology, there is a concept called emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is when we say, I feel afraid, therefore this situation must be dangerous. Or, I feel like a failure, therefore I am a failure. But emotions are just signals. They are not the truth. You can feel absolutely terrified while sitting perfectly safe on a comfortable sofa. To overcome imaginary problems, we have to learn to become the observer of our thoughts, rather than being the victim of them. Imagine you are standing on a bridge over a busy highway. The cars driving underneath you are your thoughts. Some cars are bright and shiny, these are happy, peaceful thoughts. Some cars are loud, dirty, and speeding dangerously, these are your anxious, catastrophizing thoughts. When your mind creates a problem, it's like a loud, dirty truck driving down the highway. You're going to lose your job. You have a choice. You can jump off the bridge, grab onto the back of the truck, and let it drag you down the highway into misery. Or, you can stay on the bridge. You can watch the truck drive by. You can look at it and say, wow, that's a very loud, scary thought. But I don't have to go with it. This takes practice. It is a mental muscle that you have to build over time. Let's look at some practical techniques you can use the next time your mind starts building an imaginary disaster. The first technique is something I like to call the detective. When you feel that tightness in your chest, and you notice a terrible story forming in your mind, I want you to stop and write it down. There is something magical that happens when you take a thought out of your head and put it on a piece of paper. Inside your head, thoughts swirl around like a tornado. They feel massive and overwhelming. But when you write them down on a small piece of paper, they lose a lot of their power. You can look at them objectively. Let's go back to David, the man who got the text from his boss. If David used the detective technique, he would take a pen and write. My boss said we need to talk, so I am definitely getting fired. Then, he needs to ask himself a simple question: is this 100% true? Can he prove it in a court of law? Does he have undeniable evidence? The answer is no. It is an assumption. Next, he asks, what is the actual evidence? Evidence for getting fired? None. The boss just wanted to talk. Evidence against getting fired: he had a great performance review last month. He just finished a big project successfully. He is rarely late to work. By looking at the actual evidence, David forces his brain out of its emotional survival mode and into the logical, rational part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. When you engage logic, you calm the physical anxiety in your body. Another wonderful technique is the best friend test. We are often incredibly cruel to ourselves in our own minds. The stories we invent usually involve us being stupid, unlovable, or incompetent. Imagine if your best friend came to you and said, my partner seemed really quiet at dinner. I think they hate me, I think they are going to leave me, I think I'm completely unlovable and I'll be alone forever. What would you say to your friend? Would you say, yes, you're right? You are terrible and they definitely hate you? Of course not. You are a good friend. You would be compassionate. You would say, hey, take a deep breath. They were probably just tired. You are wonderful and lovable. Don't jump to conclusions. Let's just wait and see. Why is it so easy to offer realistic, comforting advice to a friend, but so impossible to offer it to ourselves? The next time your mind creates an imaginary problem, I want you to step outside of yourself. Pretend it is your dearest friend who is having this worry. Speak to yourself internally with the same gentle, rational, compassionate voice you would use for them. Say to yourself, it's okay that you feel anxious. Uncertainty is scary. But we don't have enough facts yet. Let's not write a tragedy before we know the truth. This brings us to a really beautiful concept. The concept of staying in the present. Anxiety cannot exist in the present moment. Think about it. Anxiety is almost always about the future. It is about what might happen tomorrow, next week, or next year. Or, it is regret and overthinking about the past. Replaying a conversation from yesterday, wishing you had said something different. Your mind is a time traveler. It constantly leaves the present to go dig up problems in the past or invent problems in the future. But your body? Your physical body only ever exists in the present moment. Right here, right now. When your mind time travels to a scary future, it drags your body along with it, causing stress and panic. The fastest way to stop an imaginary problem is to force your mind to come back to where your body is. Right now. There is a very simple grounding exercise you can do anywhere, at any time. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. When you feel your mind spinning out of control, stop. Look around the room. Find 5 things you can see. Name them out loud or in your head. I see a blue coffee mug. I see the green leaves on that plant. I see a shadow on the wall. I see my shoes. I see a pen. Find 4 things you can physically feel. I feel the fabric of my shirt. I feel the chair supporting my back. I feel my feet resting on the floor. I feel the cool air from the window on my face. Find 3 things you can hear. I hear the hum of the refrigerator. I hear a car driving by outside. I hear my own breath. Find 2 things you can smell. Find 1 thing you can taste. This might seem overly simple, but it is deeply rooted in neuroscience. By forcing your brain to process intense sensory information in the present moment, you literally interrupt the neural pathways of anxiety. You pull the time-traveling mind back into the present reality. And usually, in the present reality, you are safe. There is no tiger. There is no disaster. You are just a person, sitting in a room, breathing. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's an English idiom. It means waiting for something bad to happen when things are going well. Have you ever felt that? You are having a wonderful weekend with your family, or you finally get a job you love, and instead of just enjoying it, your mind whispers, "This is too good to be true. Something bad is going to happen. You better worry, so you are prepared." This is the ultimate tragedy of the human mind. We use worry as a shield to protect us from disappointment. We think that if we imagine losing everything, we won't be caught off guard when it happens. But joy is a vulnerable emotion. To truly feel happy, to truly feel peaceful, you have to let go of control. You have to accept that you do not know what tomorrow will bring, and choose to enjoy today anyway. Let's imagine one final story together. Imagine a woman named Sarah. Sarah is an older woman, looking back on her long life. She sits on her porch with a cup of tea. She has lived through beautiful moments, and she has lived through difficult ones. She has experienced loss, career changes, and raising children. If you ask Sarah what her biggest regret in life is, she probably won't say that she regrets a failure. She won't say she regrets making a mistake. Like many people at the end of their lives, Sarah might say, "I wish I hadn't spent so much time worrying." She remembers all the nights she stayed awake imagining her children getting hurt, but they grew up healthy and safe. She remembers the months she spent agonizing over a presentation at work, but the presentation went fine, and the company eventually closed anyway. She remembers the years she spent worrying about what other people thought of her, only to realize later that people were mostly just thinking about themselves. She spent a decade of her beautiful, precious life living inside imaginary problems. We cannot get time back. The hours you spend worrying about a conversation that might never happen are hours you are stealing from your actual life. You deserve to enjoy your life. You deserve to experience the peace of a quiet moment without your mind inventing a crisis. Building a calmer, more realistic mindset takes time. It is a slow, gentle process. You are going to fall back into catastrophizing. You are going to have days where you mind read and assume the worst. When that happens, please don't be angry with yourself. Just notice it. Say, there goes my brain again, trying to protect me. Thank you, brain, but we are safe right now. Every time you catch an imaginary problem and bring yourself back to reality, you are physically rewiring your brain. You are building a new pathway. A pathway of peace. Remember, not every thought deserves to be believed. You don't have to attend every argument you are invited to, especially the ones happening inside your own head. Most of the fears you carry will never become reality. The heavy burdens you are carrying about tomorrow are an illusion. True peace begins the moment we learn to question our thoughts instead of automatically trusting them. We always have a choice in how we respond to our minds. We can choose to be the calm observer. As we come to the end of our time together today, I want to thank you for listening. This is deep, sometimes difficult work, but it is the most rewarding work you will ever do. If today's conversation helped you see your thoughts in a new way, please give this video a like and subscribe to Daily English Podcast for more relaxing English listening practice and meaningful conversations about life. And before you go, I'd really love to hear from you. What's one imaginary problem you've spent too much time worrying about? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might remind someone else that they're not alone. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself. Keep learning. Keep growing. And I'll see you in the next episode of Daily English Podcast.